Farm workers are some of the poorest paid and most exploited workers within the U.S. economy. They earn on average $10,000 a year and are excluded from many of the fundamental labor rights guaranteed to most other U.S. workers, including the right to organize and the right to overtime pay. This map shows the vulnerability to enslavement due to national human rights practices. The graph on the left shows that 10% of slavery is due to agriculture. The graph on the right shows the legal profits made from human trafficking. Farm workers also lack health insurance, sick leave, pensions, and job security. These substandard conditions are the fertile ground that gives rise to forced labor in U.S. fields. The majority of people affected are migrant workers from Mexico, Guatemala, and Haiti, with increasing rural poverty and political unrest driving their migration. Traffickers prey upon migrant workers' vulnerability and desperation to find work, at times in their country of origin or once they have already crossed the border into the U.S. In the past 10 years, there have been 6 federal prosecutions of Florida farm employees affecting well over 1,000 workers. More than 1,200 people have been freed from agricultural slavery rings in Florida during the last 10 to 15 years. Workers tell stories of brutal beatings, being shackled in chains at night, no regular pay for work, housing where 20 pickers share one mobile home and are each charged upwards of $200 per month in rent. Yes, per person. No shade in the fields, no break for meals, 10 to 12-hour workdays, 7 days a week. With financial obligations and no way to escape, many tomato field workers have found themselves modern-day slaves.
They are the migrants, workers in the sweatshops of the soil.
In 1960, CBS broadcast the landmark documentary, Harvest of Shame. Hosted by legendary journalist Edward R. Murrow, the program introduced America to the plight of migrant farm workers. Oppressive working conditions, poverty-level wages, and substandard housing were depicted graphically, and the program made a distinct impression on the conscience of the American people. While federal labor laws, including minimum wage standards, have been implemented since 1960, some workers claim things haven't changed in the 40 years since Harvest of Shame. In fact, some suggest slavery is alive and well in the fields of southern Florida.
It is terribly important that we understand how in the year 2008 slavery can exist in Immokalee.
All of us must try to do something to rectify the situation, or it's never going to change.
A recent hearing on Capitol Hill is only the latest chapter in a series of accusations, protests, and apparent vindication. Charges of slavery and deplorable working conditions largely stem from the humid tomato fields of South Florida, where thousands of laborers harvest millions of tomatoes each year.
How in God's name, in this great country in the year 2008, are people still being held in slavery?
It's still occurring today. It's probably occurring most likely right now while we sit here. Workers are held, forced to work, threatened every day if they don't work. It's the conditions that they live under, the way they are forced into a debt servitude process where they pay weekly for their housing, for their food.
In every case documented by the CIW, an element of debt bondage is involved. Traffickers promise to take workers on credit to well-paid jobs where the debt incurred for transport can be paid off quickly. In some instances, workers arrive at the place of work already thousands of dollars in debt. Subsequently, they are forced to pay off their debts in conditions to which they did not agree, working in the fields for 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. Deductions are made from their wages for transport, accommodation, food, work equipment, and supposed tax and Social Security payments. Weekly wages are sporadic, and in many instances, workers are left with no pay. Enslaved workers are taken to labor camps. Some endure verbal abuse along with threats of violence and death to themselves and their families back home. In the most severe cases, employers use public beatings, pistol weapons, and shootings to make an example of those trying to escape. In addition, women in forced labor are sometimes faced with sexual harassment and even violent sexual assault. Products made or resulting from agricultural slavery include coffee, sugar, rice, beans, cotton, chocolate, saffron, gold, seafood, cell phones, computers, balloons, tires, steel, and tomatoes.
Thailand's growing economy is heavily reliant on labour-intensive industries, including agriculture, fishing, and seafood processing. With one of the lowest unemployment rates in the world, growing prosperity means many Thai citizens have turned away from hard, manual jobs. This has led to a labour shortage in some industries, which are now almost entirely dependent on migrant workers. Hundreds of people cross the border from Myanmar and other neighbouring countries every day to help meet this demand. But the official immigration system is expensive and complicated, and many people enter Thailand illegally. This allows human traffickers to take advantage of vulnerable people migrating to find work. Thailand is now recognised as a global centre for human trafficking. A major destination for victims trafficked to Thailand is the seafood industry, which generated $7.3 billion of export revenue in 2011 and employs more than 650,000 people. The scale of the fishing industry in Thailand means boat owners rely on migrant labour and low-cost, often exploitative working conditions to minimise costs and maximise profits. Many of these boats are fishing illegally, and much of their catch is processed into fish meal, used to feed shrimp and livestock farmed in Thailand. Work on Thai fishing boats can be brutal. It's physically arduous, involving low and unpredictable pay, long hours, and extended periods at sea, with well-documented evidence of violence and even murder.
ဒါတော့သူကလေမှာတော့မျိုးစုံသုံးကြတော့စကေပါတို့နဲ့တော့ဒုတ်တို့နဲ့နောက်ဒီပိုက်လီတဲ့ဓာတ်တွေနဲ့နောက်တစ်ပိုင်းပေါ့စီးတဲ့ဟာနဲ့လင်းတို့ရိုက်ကြတော့
The government needs to enforce better laws that leave no room for any type of slavery. They also need to work to make everyone more aware of the fact that slavery is still taking place, even in our own country. Companies involved in slavery need to take ownership of their actions and work to stop slavery in their company and also others. Companies that are not involved in slavery need to check into the other industries they do business with to make sure that no form of slavery is taking place there. As an MHS student, you can become more aware of what products you use that involve modern-day slavery. Think of ways you can make yourself and others more aware of the conditions that today's workers face and the slave traditions that still carry on. If you are looking to escape or are seeking help, you can call the National Human Trafficking Resource Center or the Department of Homeland Security. If communities are not educated about the connections between worker rights, immigration rights, and human trafficking because they don't see stories involving labor trafficking in the media with these links, then we as a society will not be able to address the root causes of this crime and will be fighting this battle for eternity.